So, quick disclaimer before we get started, it's not a pity party, it's not a feel sorry for me, anything like that. It's just the realities of how having a child with additional needs affects every area of your life. Mainly kind of like the social side, your ability to go out, those kind of things. It's going right back to when the twins were quite little. Obviously separated from their dad when they were 6 months old. Jaden was never the child that you could take around to friends' houses, even at sort of, say it like just turning one, because he had this obsession where he had to remove things. So if you had anything on like a low level shelf or like anything like that, he had to take it off. So you just couldn't really ever go into people's houses because he would just, it didn't matter what it was, where it was, he would find a way to get to it and he would move it. You know, like you got a TV unit with ornaments on or DVDs on or anything like that. He just could not cope with things being there. And then fast forward a little bit to the first time I got a proper boyfriend and would be at his house. He just completely trashed like his entire house. And we kind of like would joke since that maybe Jaden just hated him, didn't like the idea of me having a boyfriend, I don't know, but the amount of damage that he did to that house and the things in it, there's quite a list. The first one was one of his well-known things where he had to take pictures off the wall. So he tried to get up onto the back of the sofa and get this giant, great big, it was like a New York skyline picture that went all the whole length of the top of the sofa. And he finally got up there and he'd managed to unhook the one side of the picture and it just swung, hit the kind of wall to the side and put a hole in the wall. So it didn't damage the picture, which was all like the ex was worried about at the time. Picture was okay, but big hole in the wall. We've not been together ever so long at the time and he was out and like I can remember texting my friend at the time being like, oh my god, what do I do? She was like, just run. But that was because obviously we were used to my husband or like, for my ex-husband or like her partner who were the kind of people that would just kick off about things. Whereas he came back calm as anything, it's fine, you know, bit of filler, it'll be alright. But then as things went on, so the next one I think was like one of those giant whiskey bottles that you save coins in. Because he'd started to move it, because he knew that Jaden would get it, he'd move it. But obviously to Jaden that was a change as well that he couldn't cope with. So he'd push it over, and he'd pushed it over quite a few times, and then this one time it just shattered, which I mean it could have been, I shouldn't really laugh, because it could have been pretty nasty. There was glass and coins all over the entire floor. What else did you do? I broke the speakers of the PC, which I don't know whether he didn't like the noise or I don't know what the reason was for that one, but he just broke the paper like cone part of the speakers. I'm sure there were other things, but obviously back then he was 2.5. He was completely non-verbal, no real understanding. And between us we had 4 kids, so his daughter was a week different in age to the twins, and then he had a son that was like a year and a bit older. So it was all, I think, just too much for Jade. And he used to like ask to go, or he'd go to his like playpen kind of carry cot thing that he had. Oh, not carry cot, but travel cot. And he'd go and get in the travel cot just to kind of get away from the chaos. But then the rest of the time he'd be causing the chaos. So yeah, that was a bit of a disaster. And then I mean, he was amazing and he was really patient and he'd, you know, Google 1,000,001 ways to try and help and look at buying like sensory toys for him and this, that and the other, and used to offer to come to like any of Jaden's appointments with paediatricians and stuff like that. But in the end, yeah, he couldn't cope with it, which you can't blame him. So obviously that relationship, yeah, wasn't going to go anywhere. Moving on to son, I don't know, yeah, you can't really take him anywhere, bless him. He's not as bad as he used to be, but I'd still, if I can avoid taking him to people's houses, like I can remember that boyfriend like saying like, oh, like going round to his mum's house. I was like, I can't, I would not, I just couldn't do it. So his mum met the twins at his house, and I think we maybe once went round to like his mum's garden, but I was like, there is no way on earth I'm taking this child into your mum's house. And still to this day, yeah, I don't, it obviously depends on his mood and that kind of thing, but yeah, I dread taking him into people's houses. Pubs and things, again, are like I've always said before, very hit or miss. There's certain places he can cope with, certain moods when he can cope, certain times when he can't, but just in general, I'd say we don't really get invited to many things anymore. I'm sure that's not personal, I'm sure it's not. It's probably because obviously when he was younger I'd just avoid going to anything, so people just kind of like gave up bothering inviting us. Other relationships since, there's one who's a saint and he'll kill me because he'll probably watch this and hate me for saying it, but he could cope with Jade in like any situation pretty much, so that's a different kind of thing, I guess, because he just knows how to deal with him, whereas most people, not meaning to, but most people will kind of wind him up and how to explain it, because obviously he has his little moments of getting hyper and he has like his imagination of bad guys and all of these kind of things, and people tend to like play into it, and then that gets him up here and you can't bring him back down. Whereas you need to know how to kind of nip that in the bud and be like, no, because it could be stood in McDonald's and he'll like point out a bad guy and you have to be able to, no, Jade, there's no bad guys, not be like, oh yeah, because if you play into it then he'll be up on the ceiling somewhere on like this hyper kind of moment that you can't explain. He's obviously had to deal with other times where, I don't know, say like we've been in a garden centre and I think I told Jaden he couldn't push a trolley or something and he just completely lost it, and there was this massive thing of I think there were glass beer bottles all down this one side, and he just picked him up, put him over his shoulder, got him out of the situation, because otherwise, you know, those glass bottles had gone everywhere. It wouldn't have been a good situation for anybody. I don't know, he's just got this way of dealing with him, of bringing him back down. But I suppose because he hasn't got children of his own, he listens to me more. He'll tell me if I'm wrong, which are one of the only people that I'll listen to when he tells me that I'm being too harsh or I'm overreacting, or I'm not, you know, I'm telling him he can't do something before he even tries, and because that is something I'm quite bad for. You know, when he went to ride his bike without the stabilisers, I'll say to him, oh, well, you might not be able to do it first time, because I know how frustrated he gets. Obviously, because then I've said you can't do it, he doesn't want to try. So you have to be so careful in how you handle those kind of things. And yeah, we're just very, very lucky to have him in our life. I don't really leave them much. There's not really many people that I could, or that I would feel comfortable leaving them with in terms of like going out in the evening, having a social life, anything like that. So I don't really have a life. I don't really need a life. They are my life. But yeah, that's the kind of general social side of it. When it comes to family's a very difficult one, isn't it? Where do we even start with that? When it's my own family, you can kind of, I shout, because that's the only way to, you know, if my mum's saying something, and my mum's, I don't know, so even with my tribunal, my mum was like, oh, you know, don't rely on the fact that you're going to win it, or something like that, then I'll go mad, because I'm like, well, have some faith. You know, you understand, or you should understand how much I struggle and all those kind of things. When it's their dad's side of the family, obviously it's a little bit more difficult. And that's something that for the last 2 years we just haven't really talked about, because they don't really know how to handle it. His granddad gets it to a degree, we don't talk about it, if that makes sense. Like they're very, very patient with him and that kind of thing, but we don't really talk about it. We've just been away with their nan at Butlins for the weekend, and yeah, it's something we've not seen eye to eye on, shall we say, in the past, and so it's just something that's not been talked about for 2 years, which is a long time, because it was such a difficult, well, not even conversational argument that we'd had previously where she sort of called me negative and said I'd writing him off for life and this, that and the other. But she made a comment when we were on our way home from Butlins, because I was saying, people expect him to be naughty essentially because people know that he has got special needs. They kind of expect him to have bad behaviour, and I was like, it's not, he doesn't have bad behaviour. And she said, no, it's just that he needs a lot more attention. Well, not needs attention, but he, in terms of like supervision and things like that. And that was the first time I was like, oh, she kind of almost gets it. We'll just leave it at that for now. And at some point, diagnosis day will come and all those kind of things. And at some point we'll have to sit down and talk about it again. But obviously my biggest worry is I don't leave him with anybody that I feel doesn't understand that. So she has recently been using his reins. She's out and about with him. She will put his reins on him and things like that. And I just wouldn't feel safe leaving him with somebody that would treat him as a normal child. As horrible as that sounds, and I don't mean that in a horrible way, just in terms of his own safety and things like that, if people had that kind of you treat him as a normal child attitude, which I used to get so much from, even from my own mum in the past, you can't to a degree, because if you would expect him to walk like by a road like a normal child, or be able to leave him unattended in the house while you were upstairs you just can't. So I wouldn't be able to leave him with somebody unless I was sure that they live by my rules, and that is the control freak in me, but it's also obviously a safety thing. Obviously it is all quite tough on his sister, because that's why I've always tried as much as possible to give them both as normal a life as possible, because I knew so many SEN mums from when they were younger that shut themselves away in the house, did never go in a supermarket because the child was screaming in the supermarket and all of those kind of things, and that just wouldn't have been fair on Ella because there wasn't anybody else. So it wasn't like I could just leave him at home, or I could leave him with Dad and take Ella out or anything like that, because that just didn't happen. And I think that's done him good, because he can cope in supermarkets and things like that, which obviously if we did just shut ourselves away for for those years, then he'd probably struggle a lot more than what he does now. Birthday parties have always been my biggest struggle. I'm trying to think, what was the first one? I can't remember what the first one was, but I can remember one of the ones when they were at their second nursery, and it was a typical like bouncy castle party, but there were also those cars that they kind of sit in and scoot along, and he was just quite happily in one of those. I was like, oh, thank God, peace and quiet. No, there's another child comes over, and is like, it's my turn, it's my turn, it's my turn. I was like, please God, just leave my child alone, because this is the only way that he's calm and he's happy and I can cope. And this girl's like trying to drag him. She was a couple of years older. She was probably like 4.5 and he was like 2. She's trying to like drag him out of this car. And then I kind of half dragged him out of this car, and then got him like into something else. And then obviously there was transition where they said, right, let's go in the other room to have food. And there was no obviously warning of that transition or anything like that. So huge meltdown. Kids all sat nicely around a table, and there's my child just like screaming and screaming, and there were people I didn't know. And I was just like, I think the first, I'd probably say 6 or 7 kids parties that we went to, I cried in the car on the way home. Every single time. I would just about hold it in while we were at the party, while he was having huge meltdowns and everything else, and then I would just cry the second I was driving home, because it was so tough. But obviously you can't have Ella miss out and not go because of that, and didn't have anybody to have him. So I think the last one that was a real struggle was it was like a forest school party, which is a bit of a ridiculous thing really. So it was like a really, well, in my opinion, a really unsafe thing anyway, because it was like open woodland. So you had to be with your child, or like on your child every second, because obviously if they wandered off slightly, they were in like woodland, just general woodland. And there was just so many like sensory issues. They wanted to wash his hands in this bucket, and I was like, no, can I just have some of the hand sanitizer, because I don't think he's just gonna like shove his hands in this random bucket to wash his hands. And they were like, no. Then the food came around, and I was like, he doesn't eat a hot dog, can you just give him a plain roll? And they were like, well, you'll just have to take the sausage out. And I was like, well, the sausage has touched the bread, so he's not going to eat it. And he stuck it out for a little while, and then he was just, yeah, screaming and screaming. And this was only less than a year ago, probably March or April this year. Yeah, so he was just screaming and screaming. They're trying to gather children together for the activities. Everybody sit nicely around the bonfire and everything else, and Jason's just there screaming his head off. And then they want to do great photos, and I'm like, just don't worry about us, we'll just stay over here. That was the last one that I think I found really, really tough, and probably the last one where I cried. We've been to a few since where they've been just like bouncy castle parties or something, and so long as I've made sure that we've got that transition time, so I can say to him, okay, we're moving now from, you got 5 more minutes on the bouncy castle, and then we need to go through and have the food and that kind of thing, then he tends to just about be okay. But in general, parties are my worst nightmare. I think what I probably relax a little bit more with now is the fact that I know like the school mums or like nursery mums. So like where they were at preschool last year, most of the parties are mums that have gone from that preschool up into like the school where they are now. So we kind of understand each other all a little bit, whereas when you don't know the other parents and they're just kind of staring at you blankly with your child screaming, it's a lot harder. But yeah, like I said at the beginning, it's not a moany, well, it's a moany video, but it's not a negative video. There's no kind of poor me or anything like that. It's just the realities of that is how it is being a SEN parent, a single parent, a twin parent. When you put the 3 things together, life isn't easy, but it is what it is, and we do okay.